Look at your hand right now. 5 fingers, flat nails, not claws. A thumb that swings wide enough to grip something, or make a fist, or hold a pencil. That hand has been shaped by roughly 7 million years of changes. None of them planned, none of them aimed at you specifically. And most people, if you ask them how it got that way, will say something like, "We evolved from apes," which is true, in the loosest sense, and almost completely unhelpful. The real story is stranger, slower, and more collaborative than most people know. In November 1974, a paleoanthropologist named Donald Johanson was working a dig site in the Afar region of Ethiopia, a sun-baked, volcanic landscape in the Awash Valley. On the morning of November 24th, he found a fragment of arm bone poking out of the sediment, then a thigh bone, then part of a skull. Over 3 weeks of excavation, his team recovered 40% of a complete skeleton, the most intact early human ancestor ever found at the time. They named her Lucy. Lucy belonged to a species called Australopithecus afarensis, and she lived 3.2 million years ago. She was small, about 3 feet 7 inches tall, roughly 60 pounds. Her skull housed a brain about the size of a large orange, but Lucy walked upright on 2 legs. Her pelvis and femur were shaped almost exactly like ours. Her knee joint had a specific angle, one that only belongs to a creature that walked upright. She was bipedal before she was intelligent. That single observation flipped the assumption that had dominated science since Darwin, that enlarged brains came first and walking followed. It was the opposite. Walking came first. And walking, it turned out, was the first domino. Standing upright freed the hands. Free hands could carry food, shape tools, and eventually build things. Upright posture also allowed early humans to spot predators across open grassland, and to regulate body heat more efficiently in the African sun, which meant they could travel farther without overheating. Each of these advantages was small on its own. Together, over millions of years, they created the conditions for everything that came after. About 800,000 years ago, the human brain began its fastest period of expansion, but the increase had started long before that. Steady, gradual, measured in tiny fractions of a percent per generation. In 2018, a paleoanthropologist named Andrew Dew and colleagues at the University of Chicago analyzed skull volumes from 94 hominin fossils spanning 13 different species, publishing their findings in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B. Brain size increased in a slow upward curve, from about 450 grams in Lucy's species to between 1,300 and 1,400 grams in modern humans. A 3-fold increase, spread over 3 million years. That is the brain in your skull right now. The increase tracked closely with environmental pressure. As the African climate shifted, drier, more variable, with longer droughts, early humans were pushed into smaller, more isolated groups. Those groups had to solve new problems: how to hunt larger animals, how to store food, how to communicate well enough to cooperate. The groups that could do those things survived. The ones that couldn't, didn't. And the brains that solved problems a little faster produced slightly more offspring, over and over, for hundreds of thousands of generations. You are the descendant of the problem solvers. But of every species that walked toward what we'd eventually call Homo sapiens, none shaped us more unexpectedly than the ones we thought were our rivals. In 2010, a geneticist named Svante Pääbo at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig published a paper in Science that surprised even him. Pääbo had spent years extracting DNA from Neanderthal bones, specifically from 3 specimens found in Vindija Cave, Croatia, bones more than 38,000 years old. The technical challenge was enormous. Ancient DNA degrades, fragments, and contaminates easily. His team spent years refining the process, and by 2010, they had sequenced roughly 60% of the entire Neanderthal genome. When they compared it to the genomes of modern humans, they found something no one had expected. In non-African genomes, between 1 and 4% of the DNA is Neanderthal. Neanderthals were not a dead end. They were a branch that merged back into ours. The interbreeding most likely happened in the Near East, roughly 100,000 to 80,000 years ago, when early modern humans first migrated out of Africa and encountered Neanderthal populations that had already been living in Europe and Western Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. They had children together, and that genetic exchange persisted in every non-African lineage that followed. In 2016, Janet Kelso, also at the Max Planck Institute, published research in the American Journal of Human Genetics showing what some of that DNA actually does. Her team found Neanderthal sequences embedded in specific immune system genes, toll-like receptor genes, which are part of the body's first line of defense against infection. Neanderthals had spent hundreds of thousands of years in Europe, accumulating resistance to its native pathogens. When modern humans arrived from Africa, their immune systems had never encountered those pathogens. The interbreeding passed some of that immunity forward, and the offspring with Neanderthal immune genes were better equipped to survive in a new environment. Part of why people of non-African descent have a measurably different immune response to infection today traces back to those encounters in the Levant 80,000 years ago. But the revision to human origins goes further than the genetics. In June 2017, Jean-Jacques Houblin, also at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, published findings from a site called Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, about 100 kilometers west of Marrakesh. The fossils included skull fragments, a jawbone, stone tools, and animal bones. Thermoluminescence dating placed them at 315,000 years ago, making them the oldest confirmed remains of Homo sapiens ever found. Not in East Africa, where scientists had looked for generations. In Morocco, in the northwest corner of the continent. For decades, the dominant model placed the origin of our species in the Great Rift Valley of East Africa, around 200,000 years ago. Jebel Irhoud pushed that date back by 115,000 years, and moved it geographically across the continent. Houblin's interpretation? Homo sapiens didn't originate in one place. Different populations of early humans were evolving across Africa simultaneously, sharing traits through contact and migration, while brain shape continued changing for tens of thousands more years. Look at the Jebel Irhoud skulls. The faces are flat and modern, recognizably human. The backs of the skulls are elongated and archaic, shaped more like Neanderthals than like us. Our species evolved face first. The modern brain came later. Human evolution wasn't a ladder, one species replacing the next in a clean sequence. It was a braided river, multiple streams running in parallel, occasionally merging, sharing what worked. Those Neanderthal immune genes, which helped your distant ancestors survive their first winters in a new continent, carry a cost. Kelso's 2016 research made explicit. The same toll-like receptor genes that increased immune reactivity to pathogens also increased susceptibility to allergic responses, greater sensitivity to pollen, dust, and environmental triggers. If you have allergies, a fraction of the genetic code responsible may be older than our species. It arrived in the human genome roughly 80,000 years ago, passed through every generation since, and now fires in your immune system every spring. The same logic runs through other traits we treat as modern problems. The tendency to store fat efficiently was a clear survival advantage in a world of unreliable food, a liability in a world of constant calories. Stress responses calibrated for immediate physical danger operate in environments built around chronic psychological pressure. Bodies shaped over millions of years for one set of conditions, now living in conditions that arrived in the last few thousand. Evolution doesn't know where it's going. It doesn't optimize for the future. It keeps what worked last time. You looked at your hand at the beginning of this. That hand is 3.2 million years of refinement. The brain processing these words tripled in size over the same span, driven by climate shifts and the pressure to cooperate and survive. The immune system defending you right now carries borrowed code from a species that went extinct 40,000 years ago. And that alone may be why you sneeze in April. We didn't evolve from one ancestor, in one place, in one unbroken line. We evolved through encounters, populations meeting, mixing, surviving together across a continent, and eventually a planet. The face you wear is 315,000 years old. We are the result of everything that didn't end.